Hey there, mommy. How you doing? I hope you're all right. Listen, you know, I often hear people ask questions about like what do you do as far as passports or documentation when you have a child? But one of the things I hardly ever hear about is the co-parenting aspect and how people actually manage it. So today, come on, grab your grab your soda, grab your coffee, grab your snacks, and come on in because we're going to talk about the things that I have had the privy of understanding and I guess establishing as a co-parent. And how do you navigate this whole international living and raising a child with another individual? So let's talk about it. Come on. All right. So let me just start with my backstory. Um, I I think in a previous video I have talked a little bit about my story, and I literally was living in DC. I was in a relationship. I had a child, and then that relationship started to go left. And so I made some very hard decisions. And interesting enough, I literally had a comment from a guy who basically went in saying that I was wrong for, I was selfish. There you go. That was the word that was being used. I was selfish for taking my child and moving abroad, and I should have basically left him with his father. I'm not even going. I've already addressed that with him, and, and we're gonna keep that moving. However, I do want to talk about the fact that although I made a decision for my sanity, my sanity, for me to be at peace, and I'm not going to ever, not now or any other time, apologize for putting myself first, because it was a very hard decision. It wasn't just something one and done. It literally, I spent almost three and I just literally thought about this the other day. I literally spent 3 years of my life fighting for, and I wish I knew then what I know now, but obviously there was a lesson in it. But I spent a lot of time fighting for my peace, right? And my child's father is a good dude. We're not aligned on a lot of different things. Didn't know that until I have a child. So, okay, it is what it is. Um, but not to disregard him or to go into any depth about the relationship. I made a choice for my personal well-being that that relationship didn't serve me. Unfortunately, there is a child that's involved. And in the perfect world, all things being perfect, things will, turn out different ways. However, this is real life, and real life is that I not only did I want to live abroad, I had already lived abroad, but I also needed to put enough space, time, and distance in that relationship for me to heal, for me to move forward. And even with that distance, it wasn't a smooth ride. And again, I'm not going to get into the details of that experience. Um, but it just wasn't a healthy situation. And again, it took some time. It took time. It took almost 3 years. Like literally, I was still fighting until last year, and when I was like, "Yo, I've gone to court, I've done all kinds of stuff, not because I sent somebody to court, and I didn't." Um, but that's neither here nor there. So at the end of the day, with my decision, and let me go backward, because before that decision was made, I want to be clear, because we're talking about international waters, and there's a lot of legalities that can be involved. And so what I would suggest and give advice to any woman who is a mother, who has children, and they're deciding that they're going to move abroad, make sure your stuff is in order. That's what I'm gonna say to that. Make sure that if that person has signed a birth certificate, that you now do everything legally. So for instance, when I got ready to leave, he gave me permission for me to leave, and it was documented. So I had a letter that was notarized, that if someone ever to stop me, here's my letter. I'm good to be traveling with this child and take it, because he has rights too, right? And so, and that letter actually served me well when someone took me to court. Now, I will say this. Um, my situation was a little messy because there was a lot of emotions involved, and I had to deal with those things. However, my child's father has always been present. Um, and they have always had a very good relationship. And I even talked about, like, it really emotionally did me in to have to separate them, because I'm raising a young man who at the time was 18 months, who is now 5 going on 6, and it just was difficult, right? And to all the brothers who want to chime in, for me, I can't speak for somebody else. I'm very cognizant about the Black family. I'm very cognizant about relationships. I'm very cognizant that I am a woman raising a young man who I have no idea some of the territory or waters that need to be crossed when it comes to that, because I'm not a man. I never claimed to be, don't desire to be. I'm definitely leaning into all my femininity. I had to change up cameras. So, like I was saying, I'm definitely leaning into my feminine energy. I don't want to have to exhort myself for any reason that I don't have to. And for me, it's difficult, especially talking about the plight of Black people, period. And then more importantly, um, making sure that our young men um, have role models and have access to male figures that they can look up to. I'm very clear about that. So, men, don't come for me, because if you come for, listen, um, I'm very cognizant of the decisions that I make and the rhyme and reason behind each and every last one of them. Now, am I perfect? Absolutely not. Can I fill the role of a father? Nope, and I'm not trying to. He has a father, and I'm clear about that. Um, but I'm also clear about having healthy boundaries, that because I have to navigate certain things. And contrary to some YouTube or some videos that were out there, I think it was a young lady talking about, children need their fathers, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not saying that they don't. However, studies show that children who have healthy mothers, active mothers, present mothers who are happy, healthy, and whole are more successful. But again, I'm not trying to demonize men and or negate the family unit because I think it's extremely important. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that I believe that two parent families are the ideal situation to be in. However, that always does not happen. And so we have to pivot and move forward. And with that being said, I'm going to pivot and keep moving. So, in my situation, it just wasn't ideal to stay. And so I had to make some very difficult decisions and I chose to move to Mexico. And so in that, like I said, it was a battle. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of just, it was emotional. It was a lot on, mostly on his behalf, mostly on his behalf. Because I'm a pretty logical in my head type person where it's like, okay, we could talk this through or not, but I'm I'm pretty straight and this is what it is and this is what it's not and let's move forward on these terms and you know. However, um again I made some decisions for my well-being and also for my child's well-being. I didn't feel like um staying in that situation would have been the best or ideal situation for my son. Um because I wasn't happy. I was drained. I was exhausted. And I didn't want my son to see me that way. I wanted him to see me as a vibrant, healthy individual. And I wanted him to see me in a healthy, loving relationship. And that's not what he would have saw. Fortunately for him, he was 18 months and we kept it moving, right? And so with that, again, I would caution anybody who is making this decision to think about the legality aspects of it. You know, if that person's on the birth certificate, that person has rights and they do need to give authority to you for you to move abroad. All right. That being said, you know, if you need assistance, advice, coaching on that, I am a certified life coach, expat coach. I've been doing this for 15 years, but more importantly, I've been living abroad with my son for almost 5 years. And when I say legally, I've gone through the gamut. I've been in court. I And what a lot of people don't know is that, once you move, after 6 months of you living in a particular place, that place has jurisdiction. So, um, again, when I say I've been through it, I had to go through a lot of different things and it wasn't always easy. But let's get to the point of co-parenting because that's where we really going with this. And co-parenting, when you get into a place, if you aren't already in a place, when you get to a place where you can have conversations and talk about the child, because that is the key aspect, because that's the common denominator is the child. And so co-parenting, there are several different caveats and just depending on who you're dealing with. Ideally, you want to be dealing with somebody who is level-headed and understands, and you all are in agreement on how to move forward. But things to think about is visitation. You know, last year, well, so my child's father has come. Well, I lived in Mexico. He's come to Mexico several times. Some of those times didn't go well. But he visited. I would also take my child every 3 months back to the US. Now that we live in Malaysia, it's not to go back and forth because we're not 4 hours away, right? So that visitation looks totally different. So last year, in October, I took him to the United States. He spent a month with his father, and then we came back. Uh, Next month, he'll go back. He'll spend a couple months with his father. And so that's the arrangement. There is no custody um, or visitation outlined legally. So with that, it's just about communicating. And his father was going to come here last month, but then some things happened. So basically, just adjusting visitation based off of where we currently live. Um, but one of the biggest things that especially because I do a lot of soft life coaching and just dealing with my own personal issues and, ailments and all the things that life throws at me. The biggest thing I had to learn is boundaries, how to set them, how to enforce them, and basically how to say no and walk away and let that go. Like, nope, we're not doing that today. And sorry, goodbye. I'm not participating in any way, shape, or form because if it interferes with my peace, we not doing it. Period. Like, and what we not gonna do is get disrespectful. What we not gonna do is get disrespectful. And so we gonna listen. We not doing this. And if you can't call here and have a good conversation, we not having conversations. So and until you can, and I had to do that. I had to cut people out for months. Like, look, nope, not doing that. Not at all. Not today. Not on my watch. Sorry, not sorry. But boundaries are important because people will run amok in your life if you let them. And she is not about that life at all in any way, shape, or form. I'm not doing it because it's just not healthy. Like, and it literally took me 2 years to get to that point where I just was like, no means no, stop. Don't, I'm not, no, not doing it. Not having this conversation with you. I'm not doing it. And I had to go through a whole lot. Like, you know, um, because I'm really big on introducing people to people. Like, I don't, I don't feel like it's really cool for you to introduce these random people to our child. But and just because they're not random to you, don't mean that they're not random to because you haven't set a precedent. So we establishing stuff like that. Now I have a smaller child. If you don't have smaller children, then okay, whatever. But just getting to that part. And then my child's father calls every day. Every day there's a video call. And I'm okay with that. That might bother somebody else. It doesn't bother me. They have their connection. However, for a long time, because, he wasn't having conversations until like the last year and a half. So it's like, and it's still now. He is more into he wants to be on he's manipulative. So he wants to be on the phone so that he could play games. So he gonna maneuver the games so he can be on the phone. So if talking to his father is a way to get to the game, he gonna talk to his father. So then, that's a whole nother thing. But I think it's important to keep connections. I think it's important so that there are family ties, especially when you're living abroad, because there are so many different dynamics, and depending on how far you are, like when we lived in Mexico, it was easy to get back and forth to the US. And so what I did originally was, it was his birthday, I took him home so that he could be around his family, he could be around, you know, his father, he could be around all the extended family. And so that gave more, um it just made it a lot easier for connectivity wise, right? Um, but yeah, so you have to establish that. That's going to be important as well. Now, here's my advice. Communicate. Communication is the key to most things, honestly. And be clear and upfront about your intentions, and have clarity around how you moving and what you need, so that you can move forward. Now I get it. It's relationship. So when anytime you're in a relationship with anybody, whether it's familial relationships, whether it is, a platonic relationship with your girlfriend, or whether it is a love relationship, communication is going to be key. And when you communicate well, and oftentimes you may not be able, you might be able to communicate to the capacity in which you can communicate at that particular moment. And that's just what it is, right? But to be honest, um, it's the communication that's going to keep everything moving. When you need something, when you can't do something, when they can't do something. And again, you can't communicate on behalf of somebody else. You can only communicate on behalf of you and do the communication from your standpoint. And as long as you're clear and your intentions are straight, then that's the best that you can do. And I think as your children, especially if you have smaller children, you know, there's a lot involved. A lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, if that person's tapped in. If not, and some people are dealing with, wayward fathers who aren't that involved, or are involved to a certain extent. I don't have that situation. I have a person who wants to be totally tapped in and wants to be relevant at every aspect, which is great for my child, right? But I also think for you, as the mother, as the caregiver, you also have to make sure, and I talk about this all the time, build your community where you are, make sure that you are managing how your well-being is, because you are the caregiver. But when it comes to co-parenting, the communication, the effort that you put out, and the effort that is being put out on the other end, you have to move together. It has to be congruent if it's going to be successful. Now, again, this is when you're dealing with an individual that is present, that is a contributor, whether that's financially or emotionally, that person is, you know, available. That person is actually moving with you. So you just want to make sure that you are, communicating well, and, you know, keeping the lines of communication open. Um, and if that means establishing schedules, a lot of people need schedules. I don't happen to have a schedule where the person calls during, these times, what have you. There was one point I had to have that, call me between this time and this time, because I need to set boundaries. Um, there are co-parenting apps that I'm aware of. If you have a lot of legalities going on, there are apps where you can communicate, and it will keep tally. And if the communication gets rough, the app will shut down or send out alerts or what have you. I've looked into those. I don't haven't ever used them, but those are good resources. Um, I use Meet for communication for video, and then also WhatsApp, and those serve me well. Um, but always remember to keep your child center stage. That is the establishment, excuse me, of the co-parenting relationship. It's about the child. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's about the child. And when you are moving and operating on in the best interest of the child, then my belief is that it'll all work out to the good, because it's not about your feelings. You know, I don't have any feelings about this individual other than, you know, I hope that they're healthy. I hope that they're doing well. Um, and beyond anything, we were friends first and we're cool. But again, emotions get involved and things get messy. And so I try to keep very clear lines of communication and keeping people at a distance, because that's what's best for me. However, sometimes that can be difficult, just keeping it real, right? So if you need to establish different ways to operate and to move forward, then make sure you have those things established. Um, but you also have to think about the child's well-being and check in. Like I check in with my son, like, are you happy? Do you want to, travel? Do you want to move? Do you, like living here? And, he loves it. He loves traveling. He loves telling people about all the different countries. He kind of gets a little braggadocious sometimes, but he's very adamant about the fact that he loves moving and experiencing different things and being able to call and tell his dad, I'm in Indonesia or I'm in Thailand. And did you know this about Thailand? And so I think since the child is this is a key aspect of their development, you have to check in with them. And, you know, I'm not saying that deters your decisions on how you move or when you move. But I think because this is their life as well, it is important to make sure that their emotional stability is a key aspect of some of your decision making. Encouraging them to talk about their emotions. For instance, last week, actually, it might have been earlier this week, my son got mad at his father and wanted to hang up on him. I was like, we're not doing that. We're going to talk about our emotions. You can just hang up on people. You can say, I no longer want to talk. I'm going to let this call go or whatever. But we're not just hanging up on people. And so we had to go through that. And it was just a learning lesson, but he was trying to express himself. And I was like, listen, tell him why you're upset. And he was like, I'm upset because he's cursing. It was like, and I don't appreciate it. That was like, okay, well, that's valid. So tell him why you don't appreciate it. Um, and tell him why you don't like it. And so getting him to understand and establish his emotions and talking through that, because that person's not right in front of him, right? That person is millions of miles away and you're dealing with a lot of things video chat. There's times where my son might do something and then his father's on the other end and he's trying to discipline him. And so what does that look like? And you have to establish those type of relationships so that it, do I take that seriously, right? Or you know, how do you establish communication between the other person and your child so that, especially if they're younger, once they get older, you don't have to be so involved. I'm not that involved, but you know, I'm here. I can hear the conversations. Um, oftentimes his father will be like, "Can you please put your mother on the phone?" Or, he's asking me, questions, or, you know, wanting to have understanding about certain things. So, just keep those lines of communication and make sure that you're keeping the connection between your child or children and their father. And then the emotional aspect. So even if I feel a way about the father, I never let that come between us at that time or in front of my child. And I just try to make sure that it's a supportive relationship and that I stay in my lane, but I also cultivate, and sometimes I'm the mediator, just by default, to kind of cultivate their relationship. And so let's just talk about when it gets messy, right? Because for me, it was messy the first 2 years. So it was really messy. Um, but if I can be totally transparent, even in that mess, I had to learn constraint. I had to learn um, how to communicate effectively in certain situations. I had to have a balance of my emotions. I had to think about my child, his well being, and it's important that you have tools and systems set up so that when things do go left, like, how can we still have a conversation if you in your feelings or if I'm in my feelings? And how, maybe there was at one point I needed a mediator, right? And so we had a mediator that kind of went left. But maybe you need somebody that could be a vocal point. At one point, I had a family member that was a sounding board that kind of could, see both sides. That was like, listen, well, maybe you're not seeing this aspect, or, maybe he's in his feelings too much to see, so step back, So those things are things that you can do when it gets messy. Mediators are good. And if you have a legal mediator, it's even better. So, sometimes it gets to that particular point. Um, but you want to make sure that you shield your child or children from chaos, and you try to eliminate chaos at all costs, because again, the common denominator between the two of you is the child or the children, and make sure that you are making sure they benefit and establish healthy relationships. And let me just go ahead and assure you, there are many days that I want to pop off. Hell, maybe I did. Maybe I did pop off. And maybe it wasn't always a healthy situation. Um, but again, there were a lot of triggers, there were a lot of just landmines I had to navigate to get to this place where I'm like totally in a healthy space where I can have a conversation and not be angry, or, you know, saying, listen, I'm hanging up because this is not going to this is going left. So now, like, listen, let's have a conversation about this. That's not going to work for me. Or, let's try to make sure that everybody is appeased. And, everybody is not going to get appeased, but the best that we can do to compromise and make situations flow in the right way. Um if I gave any advice um, to my past self, I would just say that, you know, I did a lot of things, not even aware that I was doing them, that kind of covered me and helped me in my situation. But when I'm thinking about co-parenting, and had I known what I know now, how it could have been a lot smoother. Um, and when it took 3 years to, you know, work a lot of things out. So I just say communicate. Communication is going to be the biggest thing. Um, and there are a lot of people who are dealing with, you know, can you even move abroad? And legalities, if they come up and they are a deciding factor of whether or not you can move, um, I didn't have to deal with that. But what I can say is, you know, do the best you can to help the other person understand, like, the benefits of them being able to see the world, the benefits of being able to live abroad. You know, fortunately, my child's father understands, like, it's not an ideal place for my son to be living in the inner cities of the United States. This is not. Um, he is much better growing up being in another point. He doesn't hear gunshots. He doesn't hear sirens. He's not doing all of that. So it's important just to, you know, when you're at that stage, it's important to make sure you have all the facts. It's important that you understand the legalities. It's important that you get all the signatures you need to get. But once you do get to the point where y'all have made a decision and you are moving abroad, that especially when you live, like, for me, on a whole nother time zone, I'm 12 hours ahead. So my son is very clear about, you know, when it's his night here, it's morning time for daddy. And, you know, they communicate in the morning and at night. And he's clear about the time zones. And he's like, daddy, you know, if it's 9 here, it's 9 in the morning there. You know, if it's 9 p.m. here, it's 9 in the morning there. And so little children, you have to kind of stay abreast and on those type of things. The older they get, you can kind of step back and fall back, but you still have to communicate about travel. You have to communicate about visitation. You have to communicate about communication. And you still have to establish and set boundaries as well. um, and it's okay that you're redefining what your family looks like. And it's okay that you set a standard for how you want to live. But you also need to be very clear about the communication that you're establishing with the co-parent. Because, you know, regardless of what y'all been through, that person has rights. That person, and we talking about, now when I say all this, I say this thinking, and we're gonna agree that this person is a good person, that they haven't done anything to violate you or the child. And so they have rights. It's great that they're, you know, if it, and we're also talking about a person that's in this child's life or these children's lives. And so those things are important. So we want to establish those relationships to move forward and to be healthy, right? We're not talking about unhealthy people. We're not those. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about healthy relationships that move the needle forward, not backwards. We're not doing that. We're not talking about unhealthy, individuals. Um, But it's important to co-parent with grace and, again, boundaries. Boundaries are important. Um, so I encourage you, if you are thinking about moving abroad and you're thinking about how you can move your child and you're feeling guilty about moving because of the relationship that you feel like is going to be severed, it does not have to be severed. You can have a healthy relationship and be 12 hours ahead or 12 hours behind. And people do it every day. It's just about being intentional about what it is that you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and moving forward, and how it's going to benefit your children or your child, and how it's going to benefit you in the long run. Because at the end of the day, we want healthy, whole people to be walking around here in these streets. We don't want disenfranchised people with all kinds of problems. And unfortunately, we can't eliminate all problems, but we can prevent certain things from being a. And so that's basically what I wanted to stop by and talk about today. So for anyone who is thinking about moving abroad and has a child and trying to figure out how you navigate those waters, if you need assistance and you want to do a one-on-one call, my information is down in the description. But more importantly, I'm sending you love and light because listen, I've been through the whole gamut of it all. And I got tattoos and scars. Nah, I don't. But so I live to tell about it. So at the end of the day, I want to encourage you because I know it's difficult. It's difficult when you are down the street, around the corner in the same city with an individual and trying to navigate co-parenting. And so it puts a lot of different layers on top of that when you move abroad and you have children or a child. So if this resonates with you, please drop a comment. Let's talk about it. Tell me how you're navigating co-parenting, um, and how you anticipate or seek co-parenting while living abroad. You're not alone. You're not the first person who had to deal with this, or you won't be the last person who would have to deal with this. So we don't want you to do this alone. We have a community of people. There are plenty of sisters out here living abroad, and we're building, a community one brick at a time. And it's all about sharing resources. And so, if I can be a resource to someone who has to navigate this, whether you want to or you don't, the thing is being able to do it with grace as well as wisdom. So don't forget to like, share, or subscribe and comment. See, your comments help other people like you find my content. And so doesn't cost you anything to drop a comment, doesn't cost you anything to like or share. But I'm encouraging all my mamas out here to keep it moving, always live your best life. And remember, find your flow, follow your freedom, and drift deep. Until next time, I love you.